The Anomaly, Tensura X Data Live, by Nocturne_Chapter 25. Echoes of the Past. Shidu Pav. It was now lunchtime, and Shidu couldn't shake the strange interaction he'd had with the new timeline's origami. He needed answers. He pulled out his phone and dialed Kotori, hoping she could shed some light on the situation. According to Kotori, Origami had still been a member of the AST in this timeline, though she'd retired around the same time Devil began appearing. No one knew exactly why she left the force. Shidu, troubled by this information, wrote a quick note and left it on Origami's desk, requesting to speak with her privately on the rooftop during the lunch break. When they met on the rooftop, Origami explained her reason for joining the AST in this world: gratitude. Her parents had been saved from a spirit attack years ago, and in thanks, she had dedicated herself to the AST. But what truly shook Shidu was her belief that the person who saved them and later died might have been his older brother, due to a striking resemblance. Origami continued, mentioning that her parents had still died, but not due to any spirit. 4 years ago, they'd passed away in a tragic car accident. The pain in her voice was clear, yet it seemed to have shaped her into the cheerful and shy version of Origami that Shidu now faced, a far cry from the cold and blunt girl he once knew. Shidu opened his mouth to question her about becoming a spirit, about the mysteries of this new world, but before he could, the bell rang, signaling the end of the lunch break. He still wanted to talk to Origami later, but when he asked, she blushed and stammered, requesting more time to think it over. Her reaction was unexpected, to say the least. Back in the classroom, Toka noticed his absence and curiously asked where he had been. Shidu, not wanting to dive into the complexities of his meeting with Origami, quickly changed the topic, mentioning Kotori's approval of curry for dinner. As expected, Toka's excitement at the mention of her favorite food swept away any further questions. Later, back on the rooftop, Shidu found a message from Origami on his phone. She agreed to meet him on Saturday. Relieved, he thought about discussing this with Ratatosker, but the day's events had left him mentally drained. Without realizing it, he dozed off. When he woke, Shidu felt a soft sensation beneath his head. His eyes fluttered open to find himself resting on Kurumi's lap. Her fingers delicately combed through his hair as she gazed down at him with a mischievous smile. Era, big boys should watch where they sleep, Shidu-san, she teased, her voice carrying that familiar, playful tone. Shidu jolted awake, sitting up quickly, his heart racing. Whoa, Kurumi? His voice was filled with confusion as he instinctively backed away from her. Kurumi stood up gracefully, her musket materializing from the shadow beneath her. Good evening, Shidu-san. Such a cute sleeping face you have. Shidu, still processing the situation, quickly composed himself, adopting a more cautious stance. His eyes never left her, his wariness evident. He knew all too well what Kurumi was capable of. Era, I'm deeply hurt that you fear me so much, she pouted playfully, though the amusement in her eyes remained. I thought we were comrades who changed the world together. Her words hit Shidu hard. His expression shifted from caution to disbelief. Kurumi. You remember? Yes, she said, her voice dripping with amusement. I remember everything. The original world, Origami-san, all of it. Shidu let out a slow breath, the weight of the revelation settling in. She remembered it all. That meant she knew things about this timeline, things he needed to know, but she hadn't mentioned Rimuru or the full details of Origami's transformation yet. Why did things end up this way? Shidu asked, his voice quieter now. What happened to Origami and Rimuru? Kurumi shrugged, her tone still light. That's something even I'm not entirely aware of. But as for Rimuru-san, I know very little about her current predicament. However, she smiled. Origami-san's case is a bit more interesting. Really? Shidu's eyes lit up with hope. Indeed. With a graceful motion, Kurumi transformed into her astral dress. The transformation was seamless, like the flow of shadows pooling into form around her. Shidu remained wary, despite her calm demeanor. His heart pounded in his chest, though Kurumi merely giggled at his reaction. Come now, don't be so afraid, she teased, pulling her musket from the depths of her shadow. If I shoot Yod at Origami-san, I'll be able to see the life she's lived in this timeline. Shidu blinked, his mind racing. Yod. Oh, yeah. But why didn't you use it on her when she went inverse before? Kurumi's eyes sparkled with amusement. Era, do you really think I could get close to her back then? Shizu's shoulders relaxed slightly. So, we can find out why she went inverse in this world, right? Please, Kurumi, I need your help. Kurumi chuckled, her eyes gleaming with delight. Whatever shall I do? After a few moments of silence, Shizu changed the topic. Kurumi. About Rimuru. Do you at least know why she suddenly disappeared in this world? Kurumi's smile softened, though her eyes remained sharp. Rimuru-san. Now, that's an interesting question. I'm afraid I don't have the full answer, but… She paused, tapping her chin with the barrel of her musket. I do have a theory. Shizu's heart skipped a beat. A theory? What do you mean? Kurumi looked up at the sky for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. You see, Shido-san, the timelines are delicate, fragile. Even when someone interferes with time, it's like tossing a pebble into a calm pond. The ripples spread out in every direction, and sometimes, they reach places we never intended them to. Interferes with time? Shizu repeated, suddenly realizing where she was going with this. Are you saying Rimuru might have been affected by our tampering with time? That she got caught up in the changes we made? Kurumi nodded slowly, her eyes gleaming with the knowledge she held. It's just a speculation, of course. But given Rimuru-san's unique nature, she may have been displaced or worse, trapped by the very fabric of time itself. The more we meddle with the past, the more unstable things become. Rimuru-san could very well be lost somewhere between time and space. Shizu's eyes widened in shock. Trapped in time. Is there any way to get her back? Kurumi tilted her head, her smile returning. That, I cannot say for sure. Time is a tricky thing, and those who play with it often find themselves lost in its currents. However, if Rimuru-san is as powerful as I remember, she might be able to find her own way out, eventually. Eventually? Shizu asked, his voice filled with concern. But what if she's stuck there forever? Kurumi sighed softly, her gaze softening for just a moment. Time, in all its complexities, doesn't play by our rules, Shido-san. Even I can only speculate. But if Rimuru-san were to return, it would likely be when the time is right for her. Shizu felt a chill run down his spine. The idea that Rimuru was out there, lost in the flow of time, waiting for the right moment to return, it was almost too much to process. But what can I do in the meantime? Shizu asked, his voice tinged with desperation. I can't just wait around, I need to do something. Kurumi chuckled again, this time with a touch of genuine amusement. Shido-san, you always try to take matters into your own hands, don't you? But not everything is within your control. Sometimes, all you can do is wait, and prepare. Shizu clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up inside him. I just want to help her. I don't want her to be alone, trapped like that. Kurumi's gaze softened even further, and for a moment, she seemed almost compassionate. I know, Shido-san. But this is the nature of time. You cannot always be the hero. Rimuru-san must walk her own path, as we all must. Shizu fell silent, the weight of her words sinking in. He had to accept that, for now, there might not be anything he could do for Rimuru. But that didn't make the situation any easier to bear. Kurumi, sensing his inner turmoil, gave him a small, mischievous smile. But fret not, Shido-san. You still have plenty of work to do here, don't you? With Origami-san, for example. Shizu blinked, suddenly reminded of his earlier conversation. Origami. Right. We need to figure out what happened to her, why she became an inverse spirit in this timeline. Kurumi's eyes gleamed once more as she raised her musket, the playful edge returning to her voice. Indeed. And as I said, if I use Yod on her, we can peer into the memories of this world's origami and find out what truly happened. Wouldn't that be enlightening? Shizu hesitated, still wary of Kurumi's intentions, but he knew that they had no other leads. If Yod could give them the answers they needed, he had no choice but to trust her. All right, Kurumi. Let's do it. Kurumi's smile widened, a mix of satisfaction and excitement dancing in her eyes. I do love it when you're so cooperative, Shido-san. Let's unravel this mystery together, shall we? As Kurumi's musket shimmered in the twilight, Shizu steeled himself for whatever truth they were about to uncover. Origami's fate. Rimuru's disappearance, the twisted threads of time. The answers lay just ahead, but he couldn't shake the feeling that each revelation would only lead to more questions. As Shido and Kurumi continued their conversation, a sudden presence caught Shido's attention. He glanced toward the rooftop door, where Origami stood, her gaze fixed on them. Huh? Origami? Shido stammered, his confusion evident. You see. I can explain. His words trailed off as he noticed something odd. Origami wasn't moving. She simply stood there, eerily still. Origami, Shido called again, growing more concerned. Kurumi, ever observant, turned her gaze toward Origami as well. Era, since we're in this world now, should I say, nice to meet you? Although, she added with a playful bow. It's quite possible we've already crossed paths before. But Origami remained silent, her body trembling slightly. A single word escaped her lips. Spur. It. Without warning, her form began to shift, and Shido's eyes widened in shock. He recognized the transformation immediately. Spirit armor? No way. I knew you had to be devil, Shido exclaimed. Realization dawning on him as Origami's astral dress began to envelop her. Fully transformed into her inversed astral dress form, Origami summoned her demon king. Its name echoed through the air with chilling intensity. Satan. With her demon king now manifested, Origami unleashed a barrage of powerful laser blasts, her cannons aimed squarely at Shido. Shido barely had time to react before Kurumi swiftly intervened, pushing him out of harm's way and dodging the laser beams herself with graceful ease. In an instant, Kurumi leapt into the air, her musket and flintlock pistol appearing in her hands as she moved to engage Origami. Her expression remained calm, though her words dripped with amusement. Wouldn't you say that's a rather violent way to greet someone? Kurumi remarked, her tone light but sharp as she prepared to counterattack. But, before Kurumi could even pull the trigger, the atmosphere in the air shifted abruptly. The air grew tense for a split second, and then, out of nowhere, a single droplet of water materialized above Origami. It shot toward her with the force of a laser, striking her with such power that it knocked her unconscious. Origami crashed to the floor with enough force to crack the surface beneath her. Fortunately, she managed to activate her shield just in time, protecting herself from death. But the sight left both Shido and Kurumi utterly stunned. What just happened? Shido muttered, his voice barely audible, mirroring the confusion on Kurumi's face. Before either of them could react, the same strange tension returned to the air. Once again, a droplet of water appeared, this time directly above Kurumi. Kurumi, watch out, Shido shouted, his heart racing. But it was too late. The water laser pierced through Kurumi with terrifying precision, striking her cleanly. Her body collapsed into her shadow, vanishing as it fell. Kurumi, Shido yelled, but there was no response. As Origami's demon king began to fade away, signaling that she would likely wake soon, Shido's attention shifted to the small crater on the ground where the laser had landed after striking Kurumi. The attack hadn't hit the school building, but the power behind it was unmistakable. He couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of dread. After a moment of contemplation, Shido realized that Kurumi's body had likely been one of her clones. He took a deep breath, knowing Kurumi wouldn't be taken down so easily. Kurumi, you're okay, right? That was just a clone, Shido asked cautiously, still scanning the area. From behind him, a familiar voice responded, dripping with amusement. You see right through me, Shido-san. Kurumi emerged from his shadow, unscathed, her usual confident smirk firmly in place. Relieved but still shaken, Shido turned to her. What in the world just happened? That attack, it felt so familiar. Kurumi's playful demeanor faded slightly, her eyes narrowing in thought. I was thinking the same thing. That water droplet, it carried a familiar Raryoku, didn't it? Shido nodded, still processing everything. It felt like Rimuru. But how is that possible? Kurumi crossed her arms, her gaze turning more serious than usual. Though I said it's only a theory, there's a high possibility that Rimuru is really trapped in space-time. That attack, the abnormal spirit activities that's been happening last night, it all points to something beyond the ordinary. Shido glanced at the small crater left by the water laser beam. So, All these strange events, they're actually Rimuru's doing. Most likely, Kurumi replied, her tone more analytical than usual. What's strange, though, is how the attack only happened after Origami transformed into her inverse form. It seems the laser was specifically drawn to inverse spirits. It attacked her first, then immediately went after the next spirit me. Shido's brows furrowed in concern. So, it targets inverse spirits. That would mean these water attacks are somehow reacting to the presence of an inverse spirit. Kurumi nodded, her expression thoughtful. Exactly. It's like Rimuru's presence is searching for something or trying to eliminate something. But whether Rimuru is aware of it or not, these attacks are far too precise to be random. Shido clenched his fists. We need to figure this out, and fast. If Rimuru really is stuck in that place, and if these attacks are connected to that, we might be able to help. Kurumi gave a small smile, her usual playful spark returning. Indeed, Shido-san. It seems we have quite the mystery on our hands. But don't worry, I'll be by your side, as always. Shido nodded, determined. We'll get to the bottom of this. For Origami, and for Rimuru. After what had transpired on the rooftop, Shido carefully brought the unconscious Origami to the infirmary. When she eventually woke up, she briefly questioned whether it had happened again, as her mind had been going blank lately. However, she quickly brushed aside Shido's concerns, explaining that it was likely due to anemia. After confirming that Shido had read her note about being free on Saturday, Origami left in a somewhat flustered manner. Later, Shido returned home and explained the situation to Rain and Kotori, detailing how he had used Kurumi's powers to travel through time and save Origami's parents. Rain analyzed the rooftop footage, focusing on Origami's inverse powers and the mysterious water laser beam that had attacked them. Shido also explained Rimuru's situation, how she existed in the original world but seemed absent in this one. Like Kurumi, they speculated that Rimuru was trapped in space-time. They concluded that only Shido and Kurumi retained memories of the old timeline. From this, Rain theorized that there were two possible conditions for regaining memories of the old world. Either being struck by Kurumi's Yodbet or experiencing the subsequent flow and sharing of Raryoku. As a result, since Origami had also traveled through time using Yodbet, Rimuru had likely been caught in the process as a third party and disappeared. Rain also deduced that the Origami of this world had probably regained her old memories when Phantom turned her into a spirit. However, as a defense mechanism, Origami's mind had fractured into two distinct selves, one representing her current self, the other her old self. This second personality seemed to surface whenever she encountered a spirit. Much to Kotori's surprise, Shido had already planned the usual approach to make Origami fall for him, hoping to seal her powers during their upcoming date. On Saturday, Shido and Origami met up for their date, though it began with a series of strange stops. They visited odd shops, leaving even Ratatosker and Kotori baffled and shocked, as it was Shido himself leading her to these unusual places. Origami's behavior was equally peculiar. She bought aphrodisiacs, licked Shido's spoon, took a picture of his belly button, and did all sorts of strange things. After a while, Shido decided to change course, leading them to a proper restaurant. As they enjoyed their meal, the date began to feel more genuine. Shido deliberately avoided following Ratatosker's usual three-way suggestions, choosing instead to rely on his understanding of Origami's personality to connect with her. By evening, the two found themselves at a scenic cliff, watching the sunset. Tobichi Origami's emotional levels have stabilized. Her happiness meter remains high. Reported 2 crew members aboard the Fraxinus, hovering 15,000 meters above Tengu City. The atmosphere is pretty good, so maybe we can wrap this up in one day, Kotori commented. But she seems to be anxious about something, maybe whether Shido will accept her for who she truly is, Rain observed. That wouldn't surprise me after all she's been through. We just need one more push, Kotori replied. Down on the cliff, Shido and Origami continued their conversation. So, you're really done with the AST? Shido asked. Yeah, my anemia and the episodes of my mind going blank are part of it. But, honestly, I don't even know anymore, Origami admitted. I'm not sure if wiping out spirits is the right thing to do. Her words took Shido by surprise. I'm sorry. A spirit was responsible for killing your brother, too, she added softly. Don't apologize for that, Shido exclaimed, shocking Origami. You're not wrong to feel that way. I think my brother would have said the same thing. Itsuka-kun, I'm sorry. Origami stammered, unable to find the right words but clearly relieved. Happiness meter climbing. Maximum value reached. Looks like that was the source of her anxiety, Rain observed. Shido, things are looking good. Time for the final move. Kotori declared confidently. Shido gently placed his hand on Origami's shoulder, preparing to kiss her and seal her spirit powers. As Origami looked up, she flushed and, overwhelmed, abruptly pulled away from his touch. Suddenly, the fence behind her gave way, and she began to fall off the cliff. Origami. Shido acted quickly, diving to catch her just in time. He managed to save her from plummeting, though he injured himself slightly in the process. After they landed safely, Shido looked at her with concern. You all right, Origami? He asked, lifting her up. Yeah, thanks, Origami responded, blushing, causing Shido to blush as well. Origami's gaze suddenly fixated on Shido's right arm, her expression turning silent and unreadable. Oh Origami, Shido called out hesitantly. She had noticed Ifrit's flames quietly healing his injury. Without warning, her face went blank. Spirit, she muttered. Shoot, her spirit power is rising. Shido, run away. Kotori's voice commanded with urgency, her concern clear. Origami began her transformation into devil, shoving Shido away with force as he struggled to regain his balance. While her transformation was still taking shape, Shido attempted to rush toward her, only to be thrown back by the shield surrounding her, injuring himself in the process. What are you doing? It's dangerous. Kotori's panicked voice rang out in his earpiece. Origami's targeting me. The only chance to seal her is now, while her spirit armor is incomplete. Shido shouted back, his determination unwavering. Ignoring the pain, he tried again, charging toward her with even more resolve, but was repelled once more, crashing onto the ground. If I run, the city will be destroyed. I won't let Origami do that again, Shido declared, his voice filled with conviction. Just as he prepared to rush at Origami again, Kotori's voice cut through. Step back, Shido, she ordered, as 3 large cannons materialized around Origami from the Ratatosker ship above. Yggdrafolium, we'll use Fraxinus' main battery to break her spirit barrier for 3 seconds. But Shido, quicker than anyone else, noticed Origami's own cannons forming around the Fraxinus ship. Use that time to get close and seal, Kotori. Run, Shido shouted desperately, his voice filled with fear and urgency. Before Origami could fire, the air grew tense, almost suffocating for a split second, the same sensation that had happened on the school rooftop. Suddenly, the spacequake alarm blared, breaking the silence. Origami halted her attack as the shrill noise echoed in the distance. A spacequake alarm. Does this mean another spirit? Shido exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. Why now, of all times? Commander, this is bad. Our analysis shows this explosion will be as powerful as the first ever spacequake. A frantic crew member reported from Fraxinus, sending shockwaves through the ship. Everyone, including Shido, was left in stunned silence. The Eurasian sky disaster, the massive explosion that had wiped out a large portion of the Eurasian continent, claiming 150 million lives. Was history about to repeat itself? Below, citizens scrambled, rushing to the nearest shelters without realizing just how catastrophic this upcoming explosion could be. The city's defensive technologies and protective barriers were pushed to their maximum capacity, all in a desperate bid to withstand the impending spacequake. Another spirit was coming to this world. Shido, you need to evacuate right now. You won't survive this explosion. Kotori's voice was laced with fear, her command urgent. But what about Origami? Shido protested, causing an uncharacteristic pause from Kotori. The inversed Origami, however, wasn't focused on him or the Fraxinus. Her attention had shifted to the approaching spirit, her energy flaring in response. In a flash, Toka and the other spirits appeared beside Shido, sensing the overwhelming danger. Shido, what's going on? I feel an immense spirit power, and the spacequake alarm. Toka asked, her expression tense. I don't know, but you guys should run. This isn't like anything before. Shidu's voice wavered, the fear clear. No time. It's coming, everyone. Please protect Shido, Kotori's voice commanded through the chaos. Suddenly, the tension in the air thickened again as the impending spacequake drew closer. The spirits, including Origami, instinctively raised their barriers, powerful layers of protection forming around them as the atmosphere seemed to rip apart. A moment later, it hit. The explosion tore through the air with an ear-piercing, deafening roar, so loud it felt like the sky itself was splitting. Shockwaves erupted in all directions, slamming against the barriers the spirits had thrown up. The ground beneath them quaked violently as the overwhelming force of the spacequake slammed into them. The explosion was unlike anything they had ever experienced. It was consuming, merciless, an eruption of pure destructive force that erased everything in its path, reducing the landscape to nothing but a blinding white void. The spirits, with all their strength combined, struggled to hold their barriers. Sweat dripped down their faces, their energy rapidly draining. Every second felt like an eternity as they braced themselves against the sheer force, pouring all their might into resisting the catastrophic blast. Just as their energy was about to give out, the explosion stopped. The shockwaves subsided, leaving a strange, deafening silence in its wake. The earth beneath them had been scorched, a massive crater left behind as the remnants of the explosion faded into the air. They had survived. Shidu slowly looked around, astonished. The enormous crater stretched before them, an abyss where the ground had once stood. In the very center of it, just as expected, stood a spirit, emanating a powerful aura. But to everyone's surprise, the explosion had been far smaller than anticipated. Despite the destruction, the Fraxinus still hovered above them, battered but intact. What just happened? Shidu murmured, disbelief in his voice. Rain's voice broke through the stunned silence from the ship. It appears that another spirit interfered with the explosion by causing their own spacequake to counteract it. Shidu's eyes widened as realization struck him. Kurumi. Somehow, Kurumi had interrupted the explosion with her own spacequake, lessening its impact. Thanks to her, they had all survived, and the explosion had been contained, sparing the citizens in the shelters. Shidu let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, his heart still racing as he looked up at the sky. The inversed Origami had also survived the explosion. Without hesitation, she rushed toward the new spirit that had appeared in the crater. Wait, Origami, Shidu called after her, his voice filled with desperation, but it was no use. She was already gone, a blur racing towards the unknown figure that had captured her attention. Shidu could only watch in frustration, disbelief clouding his thoughts. Why now? Breaking the tense silence, Kotori's voice came through the communicator, steady but urgent. Shidu, we'll bring you here. Come up to Fraxinus immediately. Shidu gave a determined nod, his mind racing as he and the other spirits were instantly teleported aboard Fraxinus. The ship soared at full speed towards the crater, its engines humming with urgency. Every second felt like an eternity as Shidu anxiously prepared himself for what lay ahead. Once they arrived above the crater, Shidu and the spirits wasted no time. They were teleported down, immediately running towards the center of the massive, still smoking crater. At the heart of the destruction, two figures stood facing each other, tension thick in the air. Two spirits, preparing to fight. One was Origami, her inverse form emanating raw power, and the other, someone familiar. Shidu's breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened as he recognized the new spirit. Her long silver-blue hair flowed freely in the wind, and her sharp golden eyes focused intently on Origami, a smirk playing on her lips. Our Rimuru. Shidu whispered in disbelief, his heart skipping a beat. He never expected to see her again, especially not here. Not in a moment like this. End. Chapter 25.